안녕하세요. 마이케어 대표 김일영입니다. 오늘은 아미노산 단백질의 최고 권위자이신 로볼트 교수님을 모시고 건강한 근육에 대한 필수아미노산의 역할에 대해 알아보도록 하겠습니다. The next questions is regarding to intake guideline of essential amino acid when consumed without resistant exercise. First question becomes, what are the minimum amount of balanced essential amino acid intake for muscle building, and what will be the optimal amount of essential amino acid, balanced essential amino acid per intake for maximal stimulation of muscle protein synthesis?
We know from experiments that we've done that a dose of essential amino acids in the proper profile can be as small as 3 grams and still stimulate muscle protein synthesis. The extent of stimulation of the muscle protein synthesis will increase linearly with increased dosages up to about 15 grams of protein in one setting. Beyond 15 grams, you get no further activation or increase in protein synthesis. So the dosage should range between 3 to 15 grams, and there are a variety of factors that come into play. Most importantly, I think, is what the rest of the diet is. Because if you're eating a vegetarian diet, for example, then the intake of essential amino acids is going to be deficient, particularly certain essential amino acids like lysine and leucine will be deficient relative to a high quality protein, so that you really have a higher need for essential amino acids than someone that's eating a very animal-based diet with a lot of beef and chicken and fish and so forth. So that the other part of the diet is some importance, and if the person has a very strong diet in terms of a lot of high quality protein, then a lower dose, even as low as 3 grams, will be sufficient. But as far as an effective dose relative to the comfort or ease of taking it, as well as the cost, which is always a factor as well, to maintain a continual eating. And I recommend between 5 to 7 grams as a dose taken twice a day. The reason I want to emphasize that it's probably, although you may get more effect with 15 grams, experience tells us that taking that much of a dosage for twice a day is difficult for people to maintain for prolonged periods of time. And what we're talking about here for improved healthy skeletal muscle is really taking this for the rest of your life. It's making this a component of your diet, and not something that you're just going to get strong for a few weeks of taking the supplement and then be done with it, but rather incorporating it into your normal daily routine, that you take it every day of your life for the remainder of your lifespan, so that convenience, taste, cost, all of these factors kind of come into play. You don't want to go below 3 grams per dose, but a dose of 5 to 7 grams will give a very robust response, but also be manageable in terms of the cost of the supplement and the ease of working it into your daily routine.
Okay, so 2 times per day may be okay, but you can go more if you have sufficient budget, right?
Yes, no doubt that if you're determined to put on as much muscle as you can, then more is better. There's no point of taking more than 15 grams in one dose, but if you separate the doses by a few hours, you can take even 3 doses per day.
So the muscle mass is determined by the balance between protein breakdown and synthesis. You were talking about protein synthesis. So 15 grams is the maximum. But if you're thinking about the balance between protein synthesis and breakdown, more than 15 grams still works, do you think, by suppressing protein breakdown?
Yes, I think that we do know that when you go beyond 15 grams, that any beneficial effect is more on protein slowing down protein breakdown than increasing protein synthesis. The reason that I don't really recommend this with the dietary supplement is the fact that we're trying to improve not only the muscle mass, but how well it functions.
Mhm.
And what we showed with actual studies of taking muscle biopsies and measuring muscle fiber function is that a crucial aspect of what we have with this muscle protein turnover is that the older muscle proteins, that muscle fibers that are not functioning so well and not able to generate as much force are broken down and replaced by new improved muscle fibers that have gram for gram more effectiveness than the ones that have been broken down. So that when we slow down the process of breakdown by eating a very high dose of amino acids, we at least potentially decrease the breakdown of the proteins, of the muscle fibers that are really not working so well. So I think that if we're trying to really optimize muscle function improvement, that going to a very high protein intake may not be effective. And I think it's important to understand this point when we look at studies that have used very high levels of protein intake, that if you have a major reduction in the rate of protein breakdown, that may in fact benefit the muscle mass, but not be effective in promoting the actual functionality of the muscle.
Okay, thank you. The question is that when is the best timing for the intake of essential amino acid for the best result with regard to resting condition and resistant exercise?
I'll start with the response to exercise because we have very good data to support the timing. We should take the amino acids about a half an hour before the start of resistance exercise and possibly throughout the exercise, but that can be hard. But there should be amino acids before the exercise. This will decrease the protein breakdown that normally occurs during resistance exercise, so that resistance exercise actually causes an increased breakdown of protein while you're doing it. If we have amino acids before the exercise, it prevents that breakdown. But it's also important to take amino acids following the exercise because that's when the real anabolic response to the exercise occurs. So that it's very much the most effective is to take the amino acids an hour to 30 minutes before the exercise starts. And that timing is fairly important because you want the amino acids to be elevated throughout the exercise performance. So you don't want to take it any more than an hour before, but 30 minutes before is really optimal. And then following exercise, the timing isn't as important. You can take it immediately following exercise or up to an hour or 2 hours following. My own preference is to just take the amino acids as soon as the exercise is finished. We've actually found that taking it any time up to 4 hours following exercise is of equal effectiveness, but convenience-wise, I think it's good to just take it as soon as the exercise is over. In the case of people that are not exercising, which certainly is a large proportion of people that I am aware of that are taking amino acids, the timing is a little different because there's two things to consider. If you're eating a meal that is not very high quality protein, then you want to think about eating at least 3 gram dose along with the meal so that it enhances the effectiveness of the meal. If you're eating a regular diet without any deficiencies, then the most effective time to take the amino acids is between meals, because it's during the between meal time period that the muscle is breaking down to provide the amino acids into the blood for the other tissues in the body that can't afford to lose any mass, like the muscle and the heart and immune function, and all of those types of processes have to be supplied by breakdown of muscle. So if you take your amino acid supplement between meals, you maintain that absorption of amino acids so that you don't have a breakdown of amino acids, a breakdown of muscle protein occurring to provide amino acids for the blood in the absence of dietary intake. So to summarize, if you're not exercising, You can take it with the meals if you have a very poor quality meal. But if you are eating a normal diet, then I would recommend taking it twice a day before breakfast and in mid-afternoon.
Okay, thank you. How frequent you need to consume balanced essential amino acid for the best results?
Yes, well, I think the best results will come with ingesting the essential amino acids twice per day. When you're doing exercise, the amino acids should be taken 30 minutes before and after the exercise, anywhere from right after exercise for the next few hours. In the case of not doing exercise, I recommend taking the amino acids before breakfast. In other words, when arising in the morning, and then sometime in the mid-afternoon between lunch and dinner.
Okay, I'm going to move on to some clinical conditions, including age-related loss of muscle mass and function, which is called sarcopenia. One is that in the natural process of aging, or many clinical conditions, such as cancers, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, there exists anabolic resistance, which make affected people difficult to maintain or improve muscle mass and function. What is the anabolic resistance?
Anabolic resistance refers to, first of all, the process of anabolism, which is building up muscle, as opposed to catabolism, which is referring to breaking down muscle. So when we say diminished anabolic response, what that means is that when you eat a meal that contains dietary protein, that would normally stimulate an increase in muscle mass, but if you have anabolic resistance, which occurs in many clinical conditions, you don't have the same effectiveness of the dietary protein in stimulating the skeletal muscle synthesis. The major basis for the anabolic resistance is the lack of an effective response to the activation of the initiation of protein synthesis. So when we've talked about this molecular process of a series of reactions that gets the whole process of protein synthesis started, that doesn't work as well or is not as responsive to the normal dietary intake of protein, and therefore you never really get an activation of the protein synthesis in response to the dietary protein. And this is really the major basis for loss of muscle mass in almost all circumstances. In the case of aging, for example, it's the entire basis for the response of loss of muscle with time is that you are not as responsive to normal dietary intake as you are when you're younger.
Okay, thank you. Nowadays, sarcopenia, which is an age-associated decline in muscle mass and strength, get a lot of attention from public and also recognized as a muscle disease. How can you overcome this anabolic resistance state in sarcopenia?
It's important to recognize that sarcopenia is much more readily prevented than cured, so that the steps to decrease the effective sarcopenia requires starting to deal with the problem before it advances to where there's a severe loss of muscle mass. In that circumstance, the key is to overcome the anabolic resistance. And there are two ways that you can do this. One is to perform exercise, but quite often if someone is old and depleted, they may not be able to do enough exercise to really be able to initiate or overcome the anabolic resistance. But if they take enough or consume enough of the amino acid leucine, that this will overcome the anabolic resistance at the molecular level and get the whole process initiated. So that the formulation of essential amino acids can be quite important. And if it's a very high content of leucine, it can overcome the anabolic resistance, keeping in mind that all the other 8 essential amino acids in addition to leucine have to be provided to provide the building blocks for the new protein. So that so it is possible in the case of the sarcopenia or severe loss of muscle mass and function as you get older, to diminish or even prevent that from occurring with appropriate amount of dietary intake of essential amino acids with a profile that has a high proportion of leucine.
Okay, there is the last questions remaining. I think the balanced consumption of balanced essential amino acids works for not only sarcopenia treatment, but also for other conditions. What are the other benefits we can take from consumption of balanced essential amino acid compared to that of proteins?
The first, in my laboratory, we determined the first study demonstrating the effectiveness of essential amino acids in terms of skeletal muscle synthesis about a little over 20 years ago. And at that time, there had never been any studies published on essential amino acids. And now in the last 5 years, there have been almost 200 clinical trials with essential amino acids of different combinations, some more effective than others. But all of these showing some positive effects. And so we know that we can have beneficial effects in terms of reducing the rate of aging, loss of muscle function, but we can also have major effects on improving immune function, on decreasing inflammatory response, and one of the most important metabolic factors, which has been proven by several different studies, of a decrease in the accumulation of liver fat and improvement of liver function, which is related not only to obesity, but also excess alcohol consumption. That amino acids can have a major effect in that effect. So there are a variety of factors that are related to the synthesis of specific proteins. In addition, there are roles of the amino acids that actually don't involve protein synthesis. Most importantly, the essential amino acids play an important role in the production of the neurotransmitters in the brain, so that the balance between dopamine and serotonin, which determines the extent of alertness or sleepiness, depending on which way you want to do, are controlled by the precursors of those products, which are both essential amino acids, so that depending on the balance of the amino acid formulation, we can control whether the balance promotes sleepiness or whether it promotes activity or alertness. The essential amino acids can also provide keys into the regulation of blood flow, so that there's just a whole variety of physiological functions that can be enhanced or affected by the formulation of amino acids. All things being considered, but it's important to recognize that this is not just a generic effect of essential amino acids, but very specifically formulated compositions of essential amino acids that are targeting one particular function, while at the same time, extensive research has shown that there are absolutely no adverse effects of essential amino acid consumption. In fact, in the dietary guidelines of the United States National Academy of Science, they reviewed this extensively and found no adverse effect to the consumption of any amount of any of the essential amino acids. So that it's really quite remarkable, the variety and the widespread activity of essential amino acids in promoting a healthy body in all functions, while at the same time presenting no adverse potential at all and no risk for excess consumption. So that certainly in the last 20 years, the field has really almost exploded in terms of understanding the importance of essential amino acids and dietary consumption, not only as free essential amino acids, but also the importance of including high quality protein in the diet that has a high proportion of essential amino acids.
Thank you very much for your interview. From this interview, I feel that taking essential amino acids is very useful for variety of field and health related issues. Thank you very much, Dr. Wolfe.
Okay, well, I'm glad to have had the chance to talk about essential amino acids. I think that the more people hear about it, the more they recognize the importance. And this type of interview is very exciting to have the chance to reach a large number of people and to convince them of what the importance of essential amino acid nutrition is. And I think that the questions you asked got at the very heart of why essential amino acid supplementation is an important component of dietary health.
Thank you for being with us, Dr. Wolfe, and see you next time.